Are you an entrepreneur or ready to become a boss? Welcome to Hawaii Boss, the business podcast made in Hawaii, where you will hear from island movers and shakers on who they are and their impact on our state. And now, step into the office of your host for Hawaii Boss, David Pettijohn.
Aloha, Hawaii Boss podcast crew listening in out there. This is David Pettijohn, your host, and we're back again into another awesome boss's office. This time onto the Big Island, and this remote working Silicon Valley executive is working with us today to tell us a little bit about how local boy from Kailua can make it all the way to the mainland and be very successful, but then also be able to bring it right on back and bring his expertise and tools while still providing service for that organization, is able to have his family here and live the Hawaii lifestyle. So we're excited to hear about how he does it and what motivated him to do that, but also, you know, what career path that led him out of Hawaii. So we're excited to hear from Mr. Alex Sakaguchi from Veritas Technologies LLC, a very large private organization that supports many of the top 2,000 technology companies in the world. Very active presence in the world, and we're excited to have, again, Alex here with us. Alex, welcome. Aloha, Hawaii Boss podcast crew out there listening in. We're all the way to the Big Island this week with our special guest, Mr. Alex Sakaguchi, who's a Senior Director of Global Solutions Marketing at Veritas Technologies LLC. Now, who knows what that is? Some of you may know, but it's a Fortune 200 company that provides technology solutions to some of the larger corporations out there. And so how does all that work? And what's the guy doing on the Big Island of Hawaii, taking care of all of that stuff? I don't know if he takes care of all, but we're going to find out what makes this boss work and make it happen from here in Hawaii. Alex, we're so glad you're with us. Thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Good to be here, David. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So listen, you're from Oahu, but you're living on the Big Island. Where'd you grow up in Oahu?
On the east side of the island, a place called Kailua.
Kailua. Now, listen, people visit Hawaii, they hear Waikiki, they hear all this stuff, and there's, they visit. And so Kailua is also a sunny and nice place. What would you say some of the highlights of your growing up there in Kailua was?
David, unfortunately, it's a lot different today than it was when I was growing up.
Okay.
And it was a lot different when I was growing up compared to when my dad grew up. My dad is also from Kailua. He still lives in Kailua. His parents settled in Kailua back in the 50s.
Okay. So
we've seen a lot of change in Kailua and elsewhere in Hawaii as well over that period of time. I grew up just being in the ocean. Everything was in Kailua. That's where I learned how to spearfish. It's where I learned how to stand up bodyboard, how I learned how to surf. I learned how to shore cast,
right,
canoe paddle, stand up paddle. I mean, everything. I did everything in Kailua. That was my life growing up, was just down at the ocean with friends and doing one of a zillion different activities.
So it was. And I feel that too. I think it was a lot different when I was growing up too. I didn't grow up necessarily in Hawaii. I spent some time when I was younger in high school, but in general, it feels like we were outside a lot and we were with friends, we're riding bikes, we're doing whatever the outside was. That was a lot more of what we were doing. And what a blessing for you to grow up and as the normal course of business or the course of your day, that you guys are out on the water doing all these amazing activities. And there wasn't a lot of parental supervision, I guess, at that time either.
Yeah, not like there is now. I mean, I cringe to, I've got 4 kids, right? And the things that I don't let my kids do because I'm deathly afraid or whatever.
Right.
That certainly wasn't the case when I was growing up. I did those things all the time.
Right. That's just sort of, yeah.
That was also the days before cell phones, right?
Oh yeah,
there were no cell phone. We had, I think, pagers maybe, but everything was outside. Everything was on bikes, riding to the beach, surfboards, bodyboards, fishing poles, canoe paddles.
Right.
Everything was outside. There was no staying at home, twiddling thumbs on the latest mobile game. We didn't have that option.
Yeah, we had maybe Atari, like the one kid who had the Atari or the Intellivision or whatever in the neighborhood, or that maybe we went down there.
Yeah, we had Sega. My dad bought us a Nintendo, but that wasn't like, I mean,
permanently
it was cool
attached
for like 20 minutes, but after that I was like, this is boring. Let's go outside,
Let's go out. Well, there's so much to do. What was some of your, so now, of course, when you're young too, and I thought it was been this for me as well. There was activity, there's outside. We were always, but as soon as there was this age that started coming up that you can start, your mind was enough to where you started, maybe had to start do some work. And that was true in a lot of households, that there was a certain time where folks had to, it was starting for you to pull a little bit, you didn't have. So did that happen for you? Was there an expectation that you had to start working? That's what we want to find out on Hawaii Boss is, when do people start figuring out that, oh, I got to work around here?
I think for me growing up, there was always a sense of responsibility, not necessarily going out, getting a job and earning income.
Mm-hmm.
I remember probably when I was maybe, I don't know, 12 years old, my dad sat me down. I had a whole list of chores, at home that I had to do, raking the yard, lawn mowing the yard, washing the cars, stuff like that. And I remember one time, by the way, all of those were chores that I did and I got paid for, right? I mean, it's 25 cents for this, $1 for that, $5 for this. And that's how I earned what little money I had when I was 12 years old. And I remember a particular afternoon, my dad sat me down and he said, "What do you do your chores for?" And I was like, obviously, earn money.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad said, "Okay, if that's the motivation you have to do your chores, from this day forward, you're not going to get paid, but you still have to do those same chores." And I was like, at the time, being 12, I was like, what? How am I going to earn money now? Like, it's so unfair,
Right.
But I think my dad was trying to teach me at the time that my responsibility was first to the family, and that everybody needs to pull their weight. And it wasn't something that, I was going to have to do, or that he was going to have to pay me to do to live at home. I contributed along with the rest of the family, and we all did so in different ways. And my way at the time that I was 12 years old was to take on certain responsibilities. But obviously that did sort of like squelch the income that I would have had otherwise. So as soon as I was able to drive, back then there was no, well, maybe there was driver's ed, I don't know, but it wasn't a requirement to get your license back then. So as soon as I hit 16, I was already prepared. I got my permit. I had already been practicing driving with my friends and with my parents, and I got a job. And as soon as I could drive and they would allow me to, I started driving as a Pizza Hut delivery driver. And that's how I made money. I worked. It was this measly hourly rate, and then obviously tips, right? But that's how I afforded to live. That's how I bought boards. That's how I bought fishing poles. That's how I put gas in the car so I could hang out with friends. And so as soon as I was able to, I was working.
Right. And somehow, I don't know, that's changed. I don't know. It's because of the way the economy is now and things. It feels like, youth aren't expected as much. And maybe we still need to teach them, and everyone's focused on college, but then still people don't know how to quite work yet. And there's value to both of those things. College has value, but also know how to work, know how to work the measly, whatever per hour job it is, the labor that's just work, how to do dishes, how to be on time places, and how to do those types of things. A lot of kids that, they could show up to class or show up to a Zoom call now with all this pandemic going on. So anyway, youth are having a little bit of challenge of seeing what's the best avenue out. Were you, as you were trying to see, you were working and there's a point where Pizza Hut you can see that Pizza Hut isn't going to cover you for the rest of your life. And again, no disrespect because everyone's worked at a pizza place and had to do their time, and there's great successful businesses based off of food, but again, unless you're the owner or the manager, it becomes there's a point where you're not going to be able to raise a family on a certain. When did you start seeing that? Okay, maybe I need to start looking at the world a little bit differently. Maybe there's an opportunity, especially if I want to stay in Hawaii, and how much if things cost. What is there something that experience had happened that says I need to go and do things a little bit differently? Maybe even pursued. Were your parents degree holders? Did they go to college after high school?
I think my parents, they encouraged me when I was in high school that college is important, but neither my mom or my dad went to any kind of schooling really after high school.
Same with my parents. Yeah, same thing.
I don't think that it was as valued then in their mind,
right,
as was going and getting a job and working and contributing to society and paying your way and those sorts of things. I also went through public education in Hawaii.
Sure.
So I graduated from Kailua High School, and I can tell you 100%. I've got cousins, and I've got friends that went to private school, Kamehameha or Punahou, or
right,
other schools, and I always felt, even when I was in high school, that the schools that they were going to, they were preparing them much better for school post high school than public school in Hawaii was. Part of it's the culture in Hawaii. But when you graduate from high school, that is a huge, gigantic celebration.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've been to those parties.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, it's like you have reached the top, kid. Here's
exactly.
Way to go.
You're there, right? You're
right.
there. And obviously you're not there yet. I think unfortunately many kids in Hawaii are brought up thinking that, and maybe it's just because of tradition or previous behavior. Their parents just wasn't valued the same, but they're not, at least not in the public school. When I was growing up, it wasn't made that much of a priority. And I think because of some of that limited thinking, the opportunities that are available to youth coming out of high school are also limited. And I was certainly in that bucket. After graduating, I did go away to school on the mainland. I went to Las Vegas. I did my freshman year in college at UNLV. At the time, I had loose aspirations of going into nuclear medicine. The reason I wanted to go into nuclear medicine was because it was a decent paying profession that I could get into relatively quickly. Right. In the medical field. And but being away from Hawaii, I mean, I know a lot of kids from Hawaii feel this way. I was gone. I was living in the desert for a year. I wanted to get back to the ocean. Everything I did was in the ocean. And so after that first year, I came back to Hawaii, and then I started going to community college, doing part-time credits, working full-time, working on the weekends, part-time school in the evenings. And that was my life for a few years until I actually I had some experiences in my life that put me on a different path, but I feel like I found that there are a lot of Hawaii youth that kind of find themselves in the same predicament, right? Where their options are limited. They've got responsibilities they have to fulfill. And there isn't the income level to support much beyond that. Right. Buying a house was so far off, and I can't even consider that in anywhere in my future, much less like in the immediate future. Right. So yeah, it's tough.
So coming out, yeah, unless you, and a lot of folks though find some advantage in Hawaii schools through athletics. We know that there's a challenge. Maybe academics, you don't see that there's this potential outside, and so they're not ready for school, and so they kind of bumper. There's these service, types of things. Of course, the tourism and things like that. But again, it doesn't really pay a long-term sort of wage for folks. And a lot of people, especially in Hawaii, just the expense of housing and all these things. There's just so many challenges for folks to really create a real clear pathway to live. But there is some meaningful work that can be done remotely. And that's why it's kind of curious. We get a chance to talk to you. And I'm not saying everybody, there's some campaigns in Hawaii that say, hey, let's find jobs for people so that they can work remotely, and do some things in the mainland and still work and create some, again, work opportunities for folks here in Hawaii. But now your course is that after your training at BYU, Hawaii, I believe is where you finished up and graduated. Yeah. And then this young man from Hawaii is suddenly foisted on into Silicon Valley how does that, you went to LA, you were Las Vegas and homesick, but now you came back and, got some education and now you're back out into the world. What's the difference? What was the culture shock now as a professional? Now you have a degree and you're like contributing. What's the different from the Kailua now to San Francisco?
So you're missing a big key part of that whole story right there. When I graduated from BYU Hawaii, it's true. I graduated with a degree in international business management. Okay. If somebody can tell me exactly what job employs international business management, I'd love to know. Coming out of undergrad school, I worked for a local bank, American Savings Bank. I worked in downtown Honolulu. Okay. I was a product manager, and compared to any other job I had before graduating, I was making a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But it was very, very soon after starting that I realized that there was no way I was going to be able to afford to live in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And certainly not unless, I had gotten married and, we had our first child at the time. So realizing that there was no way I was going to be able to afford to purchase a home and live comfortably in Hawaii, mm-hmm. without forcing my wife to go to work as well, which was, mm-hmm. also something that we had discussed. We wanted her to be home and to be able to raise the children. There's no way, mm-hmm. she's going to be able to do that and still be able to accomplish our goals of, owning our own home at some point. And so we made the decision to leave Hawaii. Probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. It gave me, and much better than the one I initially made to go to Las Vegas for my first year in undergrad school, right? Mm-hmm. Once I had graduated, we decided to leave. I had aspirations at the time to be in financial services as an investment banker, moved up to Utah. I worked for E-Trade Corporation. I got my Series 7 and Series 63 licenses. Mm-hmm. And I started trading securities, and even that wasn't ultimately what I wanted to do long term, mm-hmm. but it gave me a perspective outside of Hawaii that made me appreciate what I had back home in Hawaii, and sort of lit a fire in me to figure out how I was going to win at this game, right? And the game being, how do you as a young person, growing up, born and raised in Hawaii, coming up through the public education system, and still be able to work and live comfortably, owning a home in Hawaii, raising a family. Like, that's a conundrum that a lot of people haven't been able to crack yet, unless they decide to live with mom and dad forever, right? We see those monster homes. They just add on a couple of rooms, another bathroom, and there goes, that's why you see these homes for sale that are like 15 bedrooms and, 7 bath. I mean, everyone just adds their little piece onto it, right? Right. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that at all. So leaving Hawaii gave me some motivation, the motivation I needed to ultimately figure out how I was going to achieve my goals and be able to come back to Hawaii. And I didn't know when I'd be able to, but that was a goal front and center for me. Right. I lived and worked on the mainland for a number of years, and at some point I decided to go back to business school. So I
Okay.
went back and I got my MBA from BYU in Provo, Utah. And from that point, I moved out to the Bay Area. And the Bay
Okay.
Area opened my mind up to opportunities and possibilities for employment that I never would have considered. And I'm almost certain that no person born and raised growing up in Hawaii considers. And I would not have had those opportunities had I not decided to sacrifice in the short term
Right.
to leave Hawaii and go explore what else is out there.
Right. And that's courageous. And I think there's a lot of people that maybe don't have mentors or people that they've seen out there ahead of them. Hey, uncle, what do you do for a living? Oh, well, I can tell you, here's what I did. I went out and I saw the world, and then I came back, and I'm bringing a little bit of the world, but I don't have to sacrifice who I am, as from Hawaii. I can still maintain. And like you said, it's a puzzle, a game, trying to figure out how to sustain a family in Hawaii is no, you can't just kind of fall into it. It has to be, obviously thought out. And continuing your education is another way to do that. Again, I grew up the same way you did, sort of blue collar. Parents didn't, I thought it was paycheck to paycheck and just work some more and get some more money. But there's a way actually now as you learn, you go to business school, you find out there's other ways that all these businesses, these large businesses, like you say, the Fortune 200, some of the largest now you're working for in the world, some of the largest companies, and it's a whole different level of complexity and things. So how did you find when you jumped in there and like you say, your eyes opened up and your perspective happened? Was there anything that like really took you aback as you were, again, learning the routine of the Bay Area and things that just shocked you how things worked?
I think mostly it was, the Bay Area is a place that is not too dissimilar from Hawaii in terms of cost of living.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually more expensive from a housing perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit cheaper in other areas like food and whatnot.
Right.
But owning real estate in the Bay Area is even crazier than it is in Hawaii.
Yeah.
The difference is in the Bay Area is that they have an industry in technology where the salary levels are such that you can actually afford to live in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy to do, but if you qualify yourself with the right education and experience, you can get a job that is unlike any job that's available to youth or even young people out of college.
Mm-hmm.
In Hawaii. Let me give you an example, and I won't use any names, but
okay.
A few years ago, a couple of years, well, maybe it was about 2018,
mm-hmm.
around that time frame. I was sitting across just in a local cafe in the Bay Area. I was interviewing someone for a position that I had available on my team, and this person was about 18 months out of college. So 23, 24 years old, something like that. And had been working for a different company, but less than 2 years after undergraduate degree. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, what was I doing when I was 23 years old? Right. And realizing that this position that I was hiring for had a salary range somewhere on the low end of about $125,000, on the high end somewhere in the $155,000 range. And I was thinking, like, at 23 years old, I wasn't making anywhere near close to this. And here is this person sitting across from me who is 18 months out of school and has the opportunity to make, we ended up bringing this person on right at about $135,000, plus all your benefits, plus bonuses, right? You don't find jobs like that in Hawaii. No. We don't have technology as an industry, but certainly not if you go work at a hotel, right? Mm-hmm. You're not going to get a job right out of, like my own example. When I graduated from BYU Hawaii, I went to go work for a bank at the time, and which was not a bad starting salary, but my starting salary out of out of undergraduate school was $45,000 $3,000 or something. So compare and contrast that to this young person I'm hiring at
Right.
135,000. It's a big difference, and that extra money goes a long way, right? And so I did not know that those kinds of jobs existed in the Bay Area, or anywhere for that matter, when I was still in Hawaii. And I would not have been exposed to that had I not decided to leave at first. And that's the avenue that put me, or the path that I took to eventually be able to come back to Hawaii, still working in technology. Obviously, with technology, I'm able to work remotely, and still be able to, stay close to my roots, raise my family here in Hawaii, which is also a very big and important goal of mine, while being able to be somewhat comfortable in terms of, affording to buy our own, and, own a piece of land, build our own home.
Sure.
And live in relative comfort.
Right. And the technology also is available now for you to be able to work remotely. It allows us to have this, interesting podcast interview, but also it's allowed a lot of people to start working remotely. And now that causes some challenges. And even beforehand, when you had to travel back and forth, meeting as teams, and in your type of work, we would call it business development, but also technology business development. And you have to create, let's just say, you have to educate the people who are buying your system. This other large company is then engaging your company so you have to, and you're ending up teaching these and also developing information to be able to help them understand how these two large companies, because it's so much information and it's technological, and so you have to really divide it up in chunks for people to kind of get it. So you're working with these teams, and they call, you're working Scrum management, Agile, it's projects. You're working on these projects. And I assume would that be the best descriptor of what you do? You're a project manager. What your current role is now, how would you describe it?
Well, I certainly manage a lot of projects, but I wouldn't consider myself a project manager. Technically, I'm the senior director of solutions marketing for Veritas Technologies. Mind you, Veritas currently is a privately held company. So while revenue-wise, we'd certainly be in the list of Fortune companies, because we're publicly traded, or privately held, not publicly traded. Right. You won't find us on any Fortune list today. Right. Wasn't always the case. But my job is my job is storytelling. Okay. Just happens to be that I tell stories using technology. And I don't mean by getting on a Zoom call and I read a book or tell a story that way. My company creates software that protects information, essentially. So let's say you're a really large organization. Most of our customers are probably within the global Fortune 2000. So you're a really large organization, and there are many different types of technologies that you employ to support your own business. Right, because you got all the people management, you've got, the operation that you're doing, so all the financial piece, there's all this data and flow that's going around the communicating in your company, but then somehow your company helps them to arrange all that and put it in order and keep it safe. To a certain degree. So probably the simplest way to explain the majority of what my company does. Okay, not everything, but this is a good chunk of it. Okay. Would be the idea of a backup. So a backup copy. So if you had you have a device like your iPhone, right? And you have all of your information on your iPhone or your smartphone. Right. You have contacts, you have pictures, you have all kinds of data, you have applications, right? You have all these functions that happen that you rely on to communicate, right? To call your friends or meet with your family, do business deals, work, whatever the case may be. It's almost like my digital identity too. It's like my whole digital identity. Yeah. Yeah, it is. So if something happens to that phone, right? Let's say you drop it in the ocean, then to prevent you from losing access or losing the data itself, but also access to the data, it's most likely backed up or replicated into some form of a cloud service today. If you're with Apple, it's probably iCloud, right? So what Veritas does is very similar in the sense that we take and back up enterprise data so that if something bad happens, whatever the case may be, it could be a natural disaster, it could be power outage, could be an application failure, could be a variety of things. The most important thing is that that data that the company relies on to operate is not lost, and that they can get it back up and running as quickly as possible so that they can service their customers. My company makes the software that allows them to do that. My job as a solutions marketer is to help tell that story to large organizations in a way that makes them understand what makes Veritas better from a competitive standpoint, or more acutely aware or attuned to solving their challenges, whatever they may be.
Yeah, and so again, simplifying the complex, you don't realize it's a skill set, but being able to also, I think people from Hawaii, and I think they're polyglots in a sense. They understand lots of different languages because they have to filter through all of these different folks that, the sort of melting pot of Hawaii, and so I think generally Hawaiians are good storytellers because we have to learn what's this whole idea of talking story, right? When we got to talk a little bit more about that to understand, to get more of the, as they say now, let's get a little more color in that, or, again, you try and help folks understand, because then if the folks who are making these decisions, who are checking the box and saying, yes, let's spend however many $2,000 to this project over the next 5 years, those people have to understand it and believe in it. Right. Yeah. But you're not just telling a story just like, okay, this is what we think we can do, but you guys can actually deliver that thing. And that's the difference. When the story comes out true in the end, everyone is happy and successful. And that's how, the message of the good work that you guys do, I think, keeps going on. So you're engaged with folks on a daily basis on your teams, trying to create these stories and helping people to understand and communicating. It's a lot about relationships. And so, how is this now with the Zoom and things like that? How has it impacted relationships, and has it made it easier? Has it made it more difficult? And as coming out of this pandemic, where do you see us? Are we ever going to get back together, or is this our future of the digital space here?
I honestly, I don't think it really matters.
Okay.
There's a concept of resilience, and I think people in Hawaii, especially if you were born and raised here, but of course, is inherent in probably everyone. But I know a lot of my friends who have been through challenges, who have, the difficulties of being born and raised in Hawaii, and some of the stereotypes and opportunities that may or may not be available. I mean, there's all kinds of things. And what I think a lot of the kids in Hawaii are really good at is really being optimistic, seeing the glass half full rather than half empty. So to me, it doesn't really matter if we end up going back. I mean, previous to the pandemic, I was traveling probably once or twice every single month. Technology allows me to do my job nearly as effectively without traveling. And so for me, it's been a great benefit to not have to travel. Of course, I miss the human interactions. My team is all over the place. And when we were allowed to travel, I was able to bring my team together, and we would go out to dinner, and we'd visit, great cities all over the country, all over the world. And
it's tough to replicate
experiences that we were. Yeah, of course. It is very hard to replicate that camaraderie,
right?
That building of the team. But I think that people are resilient in general, and if you keep focused on the things that are most meaningful in life, not just at work, I feel like you tend to kind of bounce off, and you don't let the speed bumps like the fact that we can't travel right now, or like the fact that we're virtual, really affect you, right? I mean,
Right.
I think you find a way to be successful regardless.
Right.
And that's something I feel personally I've learned from, my own father, my mother, my grandfathers, folks that have set a good example, that no, you know what, it doesn't really matter what comes, like we're going to find a way and we'll be successful. But you have to sort of define what success means to you.
Right.
Otherwise you never really regardless of how resilient you might never achieve what it is that ultimately you want to get to, because you don't really know where you want to get.
Right.
And so I think that's an important thing to realize. I personally, whether we go back or not, I don't find any of the current situation standing in the way of my own personal or my team's success. There are some things that we have to sacrifice in the short term, and so be it. But even if they never come back, we can still be successful.
Yeah, and that is, I think that's indicative of resilience, as you say. This also leadership that's saying, okay, well, this is a tough row to hoe right here, or whatever. This is a sort of a barrier. This is an obstacle, but again, you have to find solutions. I think Hawaii folks have to be resilient. They rely on each other. Hurricanes come, guess what? We're all together on this one. Ain't no one coming to help right now. Kauai has their, I've talked to folks from Kauai when they're having a hard time, they all, sort of hooey together and get things done. So there's a little different perspective that we can here in Hawaii. We're still gonna, no matter what happens. And I think that's infectious. And I think people who want to do business here can also, gain some of that. But again, you've tried to build what you thought was your passion, or your vision of what you wanted, which is to have this space for your children so that you can be involved. And it feels like it's coming together. And as we sort of conclude the meeting, we talk about a little bit more personally about you. It sounds like you've been able to now at this time to invest some of this into your young children and start to see some of their successes. Now, I understand you're sort of a martial arts family, and as we're kind of relaxing a little bit and talking about things, your sons are quite some Brazilian jiu-jitsu stars out there, or budding stars. Would you like to? It's got to be a proud dad talking about your children, but tell us a little bit about that, because there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of folks from Hawaii are athletes that go out there and impress the world in MMA right now too. There's several, but maybe you have a different vision for what are you seeing now with your young men and this Brazilian jiu-jitsu journey that you guys are on.
When we decided to move back to Hawaii, it was primarily because I wanted to raise my children, but I shouldn't say my wife and I wanted to raise our children in the same Hawaii environment that I was raised in.
Right.
And that was number one. Obviously I had grown up doing everything in the ocean. And so I wanted my kids to have the opportunity to learn and grow and understand and develop a love and appreciation for the ocean as well. Outside of that, though, it was kind of like, we'll support them in whatever they want to do, with the one exception being self-defense. And that's really where, you mentioned my kids in jiu-jitsu. That's what got us started on that path. When we moved back, and we were in the process of building our home, my older son, he was getting bullied at school. And it reminded me of when I was young and I was getting bullied at school. And I didn't have the opportunity to train in any martial arts growing up. But I wanted to give that opportunity to my kids.
Right.
And so we started training jiu-jitsu for the kids. That was that was probably more than 8 years ago now. And and my kids have developed a lot of skill. I mean, they compete now. They most recently, my younger son, he took first place at the Pan Kids Championship out in Florida. My older son took third place. My daughter took second place. So yeah, they are accomplished. They have They've won American Nationals. They won a plethora of Naga events. I mean, they've won a lot of competitions, but that spawns from the desire that my wife and I had to instill in them some level of confidence to defend themselves against those who would bully them.
Right.
And we have been so blessed through jiu-jitsu for them to accomplish that. They are great kids. They love the ocean. They love surfing. They love the things that I grew up doing, but they have such an inner confidence that things don't faze them. Bullies don't faze them. Hardships don't faze them. They've learned to overcome, partially through jiu-jitsu, very compromising situations, very difficult situations. They've had to push through. They've been tested mentally and physically. They've had to go out and perform in front of large crowds, and the pressure that comes along with that. And I think all of that translates into life skill. And they are much more prepared to face the world at their age than I ever was when I was their age. Yeah. And jiu-jitsu is a big part of that. So while initially it was, we wanted to come back in Hawaii, want to raise them around family, in the middle of the aloha spirit, what people recognize in Hawaii is such a alluring thing. It's the appeal of Hawaii that people sort of recognize and gravitate towards. I wanted my kids to grow up in that, right? And I wanted them to love the ocean. And they decided that through a variety of experiences that they were also going to be successful in jiu-jitsu. And that has done nothing but added to their their growing and expanding repertoire of life skills. And it's not just on the sports and the athletic side. It's also in what it teaches them and how it's benefited them to just to instill confidence in who they are, not be afraid of others, not be bullied or intimidated by others in school or anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, again, like you say, it's immediately translatable that there's this one challenge that I've got wins in my back. But now when I attain, or there's another world or life challenge, I can use those same sort of skills I learned from feeling the pressure and being maybe at risk over here, but now I can turn those things I learned towards the life challenges that are certainly there to come, which is another awesome dad thing to do, mom and dad parenting thing to do, and to bring your family along in a way that gives them resources that maybe we didn't have when we were growing up. So again, important stuff as a leader. And I think you also probably do that as you gather your team together and try to help them to have their resources they need to be successful. All these things in our vocation really explains who we are in our own lives too, or should be. But so it's really neat to see sort of a person who in their work life and in their personal life are sort of exemplifying these same things. And so we're glad that the Hawaii Boss crew had a chance to come in and see you, because we're all very interested how people make it here and their perspective, and maybe in the future, where do you see things? I'm not asking, I guess, for prognostication or anything like that, but what do you hope to see as we go forward post-pandemic? Things are going, what opportunities do we have now for Hawaii in this digital world?
I think there's so many opportunities right now. I would really encourage not just our youth, not just our working professionals, but even our government leaders, community leaders, and whatnot. I think for the most part, we grew up in Hawaii that felt almost entirely dependent on tourism. And I think if there's one gigantic takeaway from the pandemic is we're not as dependent on tourism as we might have thought. Right. It's still a great thing. And, there's still a lot of opportunity within tourism, but I think we have an opportunity to really be innovative and creative with how we diversify the economy. And I think, when there are blindfolds taken off, so to speak, right? And you realize that there's so much more that we can do here. I think you create an environment that will inspire creativity and innovation from the youth coming up in Hawaii today. If we could figure out new ways to diversify the economy and still support, what Hawaii as a state needs, economically speaking, but in a more sustainable way, in a more healthy and in a way that just is kind of just above and beyond what it is that we think is right in front of us today.
Right.
We don't have the same restrictions, I would say. Right? And so now is an opportunity. Right now is that opportunity to figure out what we want to, not just what we want to do, but what we want to be going forward. And I feel like, if there was an opportunity to help or assist in that technology industry, the industry that I'm most familiar with, that I work in, that I've built our family's life within, there's so many opportunities there. And that's something that Hawaii doesn't have. This is the reason that when I was growing up and graduating high school and trying to figure out what it was that I was going to do, I had no concept of the job that I do right now. I had no idea that this even existed, that it was even a thing, much less people get paid money for it. You know what I mean? So let's expand our thinking. I'd love to assist in that and provide opportunity to Hawaii's youth to figure out what else is out there, and not only to benefit them personally, but to benefit the communities that we all want to live within.
Sure. Well, I think that's all of our goals, because again, the folks that are making some of these key decisions to move the economy forward and that are raising their families here in Hawaii, have needs, and they see a future for their children. And sometimes it looks like maybe it's a little bleak that maybe your children can't come back and live here because it's so expensive. So if we really want to change this, where we can all have our family here and be a part of it, there's some tough decisions. And that's, I think, what we're trying to do here, is to raise up that, escalate that dialogue a little bit more, and find like-minded people to say, okay, how do we make these pathways? And I think there are some people who are doing that, or trying to create these pathways for young Hawaiian, Native Hawaiian or other that are coming up here that, why do I have to leave to have this sort of, this space available for me here in Hawaii? And so trying to find that balance with all the competing interests, I think we're maybe a little ways off yet, but as we keep talking, hopefully we can find some of that vision that you're sharing there, Alex. And again, sir, thank you so much for your time. And as things go forward, and as your boys and your family, your ladies too, as they progress in the sport, but also as you expand in your career, we'd love to continue to keep up with you and welcome you back on Hawaii Boss anytime.
Thanks, David. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, you bet. So when's the next competition out there for the guys? What are you gearing up for now?
There's a Jiu-Jitsu con in November in Las Vegas. So provided it doesn't get shut down, that's where we'll be, November 13th.
Well, we'll all cross our fingers and get vaccinated if you like. And everyone, hopefully we can get through this in a hurry. And like you say, this resilience that we're all known for, hopefully we can just pound right through this and back to our, maybe a new, better normal as we go forward.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right. And well, hey, Alex, thank you so much. And until next time, aloha.
Thank you. Aloha.
Right.
Make sure to subscribe to Hawaii Boss and follow us on social media at Hawaii Boss Podcast at the links in the description. We'll see you soon in the boss's office.